So I often hear that Agile or even SAFe is great for greenfield product development, but surely it can't work with legacy development. What's your thoughts on that, Dean?
Well, legacy development is tricky, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's a big blob of legacy code. It's kind of hard to change. I wonder if I should make a giant change all at once based upon some big plan, or if I should change that system incrementally. So do the rules change when you approach a legacy system? Don't. And we all now have large-scale financial systems. You know, everybody's running SAP or Oracle. Those are platforms that support many of the new features and capabilities. You were at a session last week where one of the world's largest software companies said, we have a giant ERP system and everything touches it. And they've launched dozens of trains, right around and through it. And I'm not sure exactly how they parse that out, but they have a significant system of record that, you know, Gartner would call a system of record that you might want to treat a little bit differently. We don't treat systems any differently. If it's a legacy system and you're going to change it, is it higher or lower risk to change it incrementally? Well, the answer is it's lower risk. Now you've got to put some, you know, new component testing in place to support all that. So we just don't see them different. I mean, and I think it's a bit of a misnomer that everybody that does Agile grew up doing a mobile app for a bank. That's not what we grew up. I grew up, you know, adding Agile to medical devices. So it's not just for greenfield lightweight stuff. It's for whatever you need to build. The basic scientific cycle: plan, do, check, and act. Plan and experiment. I think in the next week we can change this mainframe environment to the thing. You know, execute the experiment, get feedback from the experiment, and make another change. So if you look at a big system and say, I'm really afraid of that, well, think about science for a little bit. What would you do about your fear? I want to take a bite at a time. I wouldn't say, I also need to plan the entire release for the next 18 months on that giant mainframe. I think that's kind of silly. I think you would go the other way. You'd say, that thing probably deserves Agile even more than the new mobile app we're going to do. Those guys don't need a lot of process. They're only going to, you know, a couple 100,000 lines of code, and even that's high level. They're going to be done.
We've got some experience of working on a legacy system that was 20, 25 years old, very brittle, very fragile, and actually the bigger the release, the bigger the risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So actually a smaller release was actually more sensible because it had less disruption to the system as well. So what about suppliers then? Because suppliers are interesting. Because if, you know, I don't think I've ever worked on an Agile release train that has not had a third-party supplier involved. The trouble is that those third-party suppliers tend to work in a different way, maybe a more traditional way, and that's governed by maybe the contractual terms that they've been set up. How do you deal with suppliers that are working in a traditional way in a safe environment? Well,
you know, how do you mix waterfall and Agile?
Yes.
It's like how do you put a dog and a cat together and get a different animal? They don't really mix. However, you can interoperate. So if you think about maybe electronic circuit design, you may have some elements of the circuit that are kind of asynchronous and running really slower, but you have to have the fastest, the clock circuit has to be the fastest thing.
Yeah.
So the Agile art is the fastest cadence, the fastest synchronization point. And then you come back to your suppliers, you say, we understand that you work this way traditionally, but we're going to need to eliminate some risk at this point in the project. So can you provide an early drop of that? And they go, well, you know, we've got this big blob, it's not really done yet. Okay, then you need to provide us the APIs. So we're going to create mocks and stubs, and we're going to pretend like that's your behavior. And they'll go, okay, we could probably do that. Because they're not stupid people. And they don't live in a box called design. There's a human being in there who's trying to do the right thing. And he's not going to say, I can't talk to you because I'm in the design box. He's going to say, well, we've designed this much, but we could spin up an API. So when you add cadence and synchronization to that, you're going to start to come up with intermediate milestones. The suppliers are going to say, well, I need to have a radio available at that point. Some kind. Could be the old radio with a new adapter on it, or I need this new piece of code. Could be the old code with a new API. It could be just the mock, and I'll fill in behind it. So we communicate via these kind of benchmark milestones based upon cadence and synchronization, and eventually the suppliers get more Agile too. I'll also tell you that every time I talk to a supplier that's not doing, you know, lean Agile development yet, they'll say, well, we know it, we would really do it, except our customer doesn't do that. And if I left the room and drove across the hall and talked to the customer, and say, well, we'd like to be a lot more Agile, but our suppliers aren't. So it's a weird little chicken and egg, and I think the producer, right, has the responsibility to gate the process and to create the cadence that works best, and suppliers can and will be supportive of that. Even recognize that sometimes the supplier's 10 times bigger than you are. If they want to continue to supply you, you have a new way of working. Yeah. And the answer is we can't wait until the final drop of Oracle financials to know that our new banking system works, because we're going to push that in 40 countries. That's too big a risk. So yeah, you're Oracle, you big boys and girls, but if you want us to base our new banking system on the new Oracle financial package, we've got to get access to that in pieces. And what's Oracle going to say? Well, that makes sense.
I think your experience is right. Actually, I've had. I always say, first thing, have a conversation with the supplier. Because, and I say to them, look, we want to work in an agile way to the supplier. And they go, thank God, I thought we wanted to work like this. So actually, yes, thank you.
We were prepared to show you all our compliance to your SDLC documents.
Or the second response I get, actually, more and more of our customers are asking to work in an agile way. Can we work as an experiment with you to work in an agile way? So I think that's, first of all, always have the conversation as well. What about...
I will tell you a funny story, though. You can cut it out if you want. So we went through this planning session where we had a big supplier who was a waterfall shop. And we did kind of our first PI planning. And we went through the whole thing, but they didn't really, they attended, they were invited. So that's a way to start to engage them. They were invited to our PI planning session so that they could see what we're doing. And we went through the risk mitigation process, and you've been through that, right? Where everybody says, what's your worst nightmare? This could happen, this could happen. And you start addressing risk very professionally. You don't make them go away. If you make all the risk go away, you make all your innovation go away. And we got to the point where, the supplier was their turn at the table, and they literally laughed out loud and said, well, we're a waterfall shop, so we don't have any of those risks. But they were laughing with us, saying, yeah, we see how you're working here, and you're identifying the things that could go wrong, and you're creating contingency plans, and that's part of your model because you're adapting as we go, and we know we're not doing that, and probably going to be pretty embarrassing for me to give you the same answer a year from now, but it was kind of funny. We don't have any risk, we're a waterfall shop.
And it's interesting as well, because you alluded to it there as well, but if you treat a supplier like a supplier, they'll behave like a supplier. So what's your experience of actually getting suppliers involved in the PI planning event? So
really good. And let me take that to another level. Let's go back to Deming. Right? What did Deming say in like 1980 about negotiating for the lowest cost supplier for any value that you buy? He says it's like the most foolish economic decision you ever make, right? So the goal with suppliers in a lean thing is suppliers are simply part of the system. Again, it's a really important component of the system. 30 years or so, we were adopted, my company, which developed medical products and software per contract, was adopted by a medical manufacturer. Adopted meaning they really liked us. And they basically came to me and said privately, you guys are really smart, you kind of don't know what you're doing. So we need your talent, but the way it's working isn't really working for us. They said, we're going to teach you the way we work. And they were very lean and continuous improvement. So they came in and mentored us. They didn't give us a bill for that or ask for a cut. They said, this is what we have to do. Now, what's the economics at work there? Why would they invest like that in that supplier? Simple economics, right? If that supplier has manufacturing has too much inventory, they're going to charge me for it, right? If I'm experiencing a big cost of delay because they're slow, that's going to cost me a lot of money. So if I can reduce their inventory, increase their inventory terms, reduce their time to market, I'm going to make more money at it. So that's the lean paradigm is not a combative relationship. You hear about lean and suppliers and just in time, right? So if you're building a Saturn in Kentucky, all the suppliers move close so they can do just in time. So that lean doesn't have that paradigm. Now at the same time, lean demands supplier performance. And they might demand continuous price reductions or continuous value increases, but it's part of a partnership. The notion that, especially today, that we could outsource our intellectual property for the world's most important systems to a supplier who gives me the bid for the lowest cost, man, you got to think about that. Have you really done the right thing long term? So the supplier-customer relationship is different. We've opined on that. We have an Agile Contracts guidance article that says, the pure time and materials thing doesn't work great, because what's the supplier's motivation? More time and materials. Right? The pure fixed price, fixed delivery thing. Okay. What's the supplier's motivation now? Okay, to deliver the least amount the least amount and get by within the time frame. They immediately put you at loggerheads. Yeah. There's a lot of ranges in between, and we've seen even in the federal commercial space and even in Department of Defense, more value-based delivery. I've seen programs that will fund 2 PIs.
Yeah.
We've got, okay, we think in 2 PIs we could get about here, and if we like the progress, we'll fund a couple more. And if we shut the program down, we'll give you 1 PI notice, and that's our budgeting model. Now, you may have given me a law of large numbers. It might be 30, 40, 50 million. Nobody ever knows. If there's a project that's supposed to cost 40 million, what's it really going to cost? 20 or 80, right? We're going to fund this much to kind of the MVP, but we'll take it as we go. And if we get into this thing and it's not really paying off, we're going to abandon ship either because you as a supplier are not able to do the job, or we shouldn't be investing in this area anyway, but we need you for the long term.
Yeah. So what's the takeaway? The suppliers are part of the system?
Yeah, they are.
Treat suppliers as
the supplier is an integral component of the system that creates this bigger system, and if you isolate that and try to optimize just the supply piece of it, the system still won't be optimized. They're an organizational component of essentially every large solution set.
Perfect. If you could give one piece of advice to an enterprise adopting SAFe, what would that be?
Train the leaders in lean agile mindset. No matter where you found it, no matter what the source was, train them with structured training, informal training, give them the lean machine, pass out out of the crisis from Deming, give them principles of product development flow, get them to think about the problem differently. They'll probably then show up in class or they'll start behaving differently.
Dean Leffingwell.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the interview.